Music's been a powerful force in my life as long as I remember. About 5, my dad took me to a picking session, and standing real close to Dad on this dirt floor cabin, he was playing guitar, and there was a fiddle and a banjo player, and there was a young father and son. And while the rest of the family crowded and listened intently, it was the first time that I had seen live music like that, and I saw its power, and I felt it right there. And instead of, the thin sound that you get with a record player or a radio, and I was surrounded by it, and I was immersed in the music. Like a baptismal experience, it awakened the music within, and it's been flowing through me ever since.
When James Reams burst onto the bluegrass scene in 1993, he developed an immediate following that has grown over the past 25-plus years to include a national and international presence. His desire has always been to reflect the tradition of bluegrass in a contemporary setting, and there are plenty of music lovers who agree that he has done just that.
Generation of bluegrass here in Brooklyn. So he's kind of the king of bluegrass in Brooklyn. So please help us welcome James Reams and the Barnstormers.
Over the years, James and his band, the Barnstormers, have embraced the nostalgia of traditional bluegrass and brought it into today's world, proving the timeless nature of this form of music and its multi-generational appeal.
Howdy there, friends and neighbors, and welcome to Darwin Lee's award-winning Real Hillbilly Music Show, America's only cutting-edge country and western music program, heard each and every week right here at the 950 spot on your AM dial on good old WHVW.
If I had to describe James' sound, let's say for someone who hadn't heard his music before, I would describe it as traditional bluegrass with heavy, old-timey hillbilly roots with a dash of honky-tonk. And that gives him his unique sound. Not to mention the fact the guy's a hell of a vocalist, too.
James's style has defied definition. His music features driving rhythm and hard-edged harmonies that take you back to a time before bluegrass was smoothed out for the uninitiated. His original songs are important additions to the bluegrass repertoire, keeping this tradition alive with contemporary issues and new sounds. Bluegrass Unlimited praised him by saying, "There are few vocalists as natural as Reams. He doesn't have to try to sound down home. He's there at each turn in the song." Bluegrass Today had this to say about him: "There's an authentic, gritty feel to James's music that can't be faked."
I'm not gonna mug you.
Is that gorgeous or what, eh?
And I believe I can run a decent marathon.
Thank you very much.
Download Veely now.
Over 25 years now, wandering along the Bluegrass Festival and concert circuit, it's always exciting to me because no matter how many times I've played a certain venue, there's always something fresh to a performance and someone new to meet. For me, it's always been and always will be about the music. It floods my senses. That all-consuming passion for picking courses through my veins. It's what keeps my heart pumping. When I'm on stage singing, that's when I feel truly alive. That's what I live for, and that's what keeps me going.
James Reams and the Barnstormers tread the terrain where bluegrass, old-time, classic country, and rockabilly meet in the night to swap stories. They successfully combine the sounds of the hills and hollers with the hum of factories, railroad yards, and honky-tonks. James Reams is a man who has had many twists and turns during his lifetime. You may think you've got a pretty good idea of who he is from his music, but there's a lot more depth to him than meets the ear.
Kentucky River keeps on flowing, pours from the mountains into my heart. Though I've left my home far behind me, the river and I never can part.
James is unofficially known as an ambassador of bluegrass, a title he takes to heart as he works to connect music lovers with the music he loves. DJs find him to be likable and authentic, not only in his music, but also in his interviews. Even though he's had to weather quite a few storms in his life, he has such a positive attitude and always seems to be encouraging folks to jump right in and get carried away by the powerful current that is bluegrass music.
The freight train blues, yeah, that freight train blues.
Ron's got a lot of hands there.
I'm telling you, I wish I had more hands. I mean, you guys are fantastic. James Reams of the Barnstormers, and you guys deserve a lot of credit for being part of that, keeping this old time tradition alive here in New York. It's a strong tradition, and it's a big following, and I think it's because of people like you that are keeping it together, all of you, and my thanks for that. I mean, you give us listeners, make it possible for us to be on the radio.
There's an identifiable James Reams and the Barnstormers sound and style. He's actually one of the few stylists that there are in bluegrass music anymore, in that when one of his records comes on or he opens his mouth, you know who he is. And I mean that as the most, I couldn't make a more sincere compliment.
James Reams has an idea of something that he wants to do, whether it's something that he's comfortable with and has done many times before, or whether it's embarking on a brand new endeavor. He has a very can-do spirit.
When I think of James Reams, the word that immediately comes to mind is authenticity. He approaches his music from a place of heart, soul, and conviction that is genuine and authentic.
First of all, congratulations to James on such a great long run with the band, and I hope he's able to keep doing it for a long time. But I do think what keeps James going is he loves the music. It's in his blood.
It's funny, whenever I'm in Kentucky, they say I'm from New York. Whenever I'm in New York, they say I'm from Kentucky. It seems that no place wants to claim me, but I find that I'm lucky because both places seem to be home. And people in Kentucky just are the same as people in New York City. They like good bluegrass music. It's all the same.
As a young man, I journeyed from my home in the mountains to reap from the city what my dreams there had sown. Behind me I put a hard rock of tradition.
We lived on top of this hill overlooking Pine Holler. My dad raised tobacco along with some cattle and chickens. Of course, we also grew our own vegetables in a garden out back. I remember that we had this great little sheepdog named Opal that I used to pal around with. My grandfather, Oscar Reams, also lived with us. He taught me to drive the tractor when I was about 4 years old.
Back home to the loving embrace of my family, I flee from this turbulent world to find calm, where no one's a stranger and no heart was hungry, where wounds too deep to heal receive balm.
The very first Reams in this area, Elizabeth and Perry, came to Kentucky in 1826 through the Cumberland Gap. They built a 2-room log cabin on the old homestead that's still around today. A barn's been built up around the cabin's exterior, protecting it from the weather. It's taken on a whole new life as a tool shed now. Those magical days on the farm ended when tobacco was no longer a viable crop for us. Dad really wasn't the best farmer anyway. So we auctioned off the farm, and I remember watching as my beloved bike was sold to another kid who rode it off down the road. We loaded up everything in the back of Dad's old car and headed north to Wisconsin to a town called Freedom.
Their high shoulder grief, the smiles on their faces deny what's beneath. Their sorrows, their burden, my troubles done. Their struggle continues, my battle is won.
There are lots of tributaries that have contributed to James's river of life. Probably the two that added the most were his dad and later in life his longtime partner, Tina Aretas.
So my biggest influence was probably my dad. He was just a big bear of a guy, and I just thought he hung the moon. Dad was in the Navy when he met and married my mom. I came along a few years later. Dad always said I was a born singer. I think it was just his way of saying that I had quite a set of lungs on me. He had this dream to be a farmer one day. And once he retired from the military, Dad moved us to the old home place in Kentucky so he could live out his dream. I remember music was always important to me. If I wasn't hanging on to Dad's pants leg as he jammed with neighbors near the homestead, I was glued to our radio and that black and white TV listening to the sounds of old-time music from the Grand Ole Opry and the Kaz Walker program. As I got older, I saved up my chore money and spent everything I had on albums. I love those old records from the likes of Riley Puckett, the Carter Family, New Lost City Ramblers, the Church Brothers, and the Bailey Brothers. A particular favorite of mine were the Camp Creek Boys. I bought all of their albums.
James started singing at churches, school functions, and family parties while he was in junior high and high school. He was about 13 or 14 when a serious bout with sickness occurred that changed his life forever. Trying to find himself, James ended up even more lost, and now homeless.
I ran out of money pretty quick after arriving in the Florida Panhandle, and though I got a job, it wasn't enough to pay even part of the rent on a place. I ended up living in an old red Mercury until the lizards took it over. Sometimes I would stay at a rescue mission, and I remember one night particularly, there was an older man in the bunk below me in the rescue mission, and he died that night. And that was sort of the reason that I felt so close to $100 Funeral. It was actually part of the reasons that recorded it on Ryman's Season, because of witnessing somebody who probably no one cared about.
$100 funerals for the unloved and unknown.
That death provided a different kind of wake-up call for me. I scrounged up enough money to call home. My big brother flew in the next day to bring me back. My family never mentioned it again. Once I got back home again, I applied myself to my schoolwork and my music with almost equal passion. I realized that I needed a good education if I wanted to earn enough money to do what I really wanted to do, make music. Although I was still pretty young, I started picking up work at square dances and local taverns. But I stuck with the school, and I graduated from college with a degree in education a short while later.
While James's dad had merely flirted with old-time music, James had a downright passion for it. His dad recognized this passion and constantly encouraged James to pursue his dream.
When I moved to New York City in 1979, it was considered by many as one of the dangerous cities in the United States. You know, it was actually sort of insane. You probably remember, you know, so it was, New York was a place that was an incubator for me to be able to create music and to create it on a more professional level.
And that's where he met the second major tributary in his life, his soulmate, Tina.
Well, the twilight softly gathers round my home amongst the hill, while all nature will soon settle down to rest.
You included the song Long Gone Out West Blues on your last album, Rhyme and Season, as a tribute to your life partner, Tina Aridis. Tell me about Tina. How did you become so close and she becomes such a huge influence in your life and your music?
Tina was such a powerful force in my life. I may have been the boat, but she was certainly the captain. It was like the wind got knocked out of my sails when she passed away from cancer in 2011, just a few days before Valentine's Day. It's still painful to talk about even now. She was such an integral part of every aspect of my life. I really wasn't sure I could go on making music without her. The music inside of me just went quiet for a while. I understand what it feels like to drown in grief. I wouldn't be celebrating 25 years in the music business if it hadn't been for Tina and her unshakable faith in me.
Well, the twilight softly gathers round my home amongst the hills, while all nature will soon settle down to rest. As I sit and sadly ponder, my thoughts with longing fills, as I often think of the one I love the best.
At first, in his scramble to survive life in the Big Apple, James didn't play much music. But when he did, those who heard his authentic Kentucky mountain sound, like Tina Aridis, encouraged him to play more. Before long, James and Tina were inseparable.
When I first met Tina, we had a lot of so-called dates. That included her coming to see me perform at the Good Coffee House Music Parlor in Brooklyn. I booked the venue and set up the sound, so we spent most of those romantic nights crawling around on the floor while Tina and I talked before the show. Back then, a bunch of us were performing as the Murphy's Oil Soap Boys in tribute to the early days of bluegrass. WKCR 89.9 FM in New York City had us on as regular guests. We even appeared on a compilation fundraiser for a local radio station in New Jersey. It was a lot of fun, and several of those guys have been a part of some of my later albums.
James, the first time I met you was with Tina in Madrid, New York, at the little Madrid Bluegrass Festival. And you two were so down home and so cosmopolitan all at the same time. And Tina took pictures of me in this classy black t-shirt that she posted on your website. It was the only time I'd ever been a model for anything, and I'll never forget it.
I remember those days, but I don't think you ever told me how Tina became so involved in promoting your career.
She recognized the need to promote bluegrass music in the area and started writing press releases for the local newspapers and magazines. She also began an email campaign focused on area DJs and concert goers that helped develop a loyal following for bluegrass in Brooklyn and for me in particular. Largely due to her efforts, we were able to entice some of the great acts in bluegrass, like the Sullivan Family, Flat Pick Genius, David Greer, the White Mountain Bluegrass, to Brooklyn. Over the course of the next several years, the Good Coffee House became the go-to place for roots music in New York City. It was around that time that the idea for the Park Slope Bluegrass and Old Time Music Jamboree was born, and I thought it was about time that we had our own Bluegrass Festival in Brooklyn. We kicked it off in style in 1998 with Major Conte and the Canebrake Rattlers. I'm happy to say that it's still going strong. In fact, the 2014 Jamboree was nominated by the IBMA, International Bluegrass Music Association, for Bluegrass Event of the Year.
As these visiting musicians showed up at James and Tina's real house to play music or record, Tina's passion for bluegrass became almost an obsession. Best of all, Tina's outgoing nature started rubbing off on James.
Okay, let's have some more music. The Mysterious Redbird.
I ran into one of my longtime idols, Tom Paley of the New Lost City Ramblers, at an old-time fiddle festival in New York. And somehow, I got up enough nerve to ask him to join me for a bite to eat. Over that meal, I talked with Tom about getting together to record some songs, I was thrilled when he agreed to team up with me and a great, talented local fiddler by the name of Bill Christopherson. We ended up recording 3 albums together between 1992 and 1998, Kentucky Songbird, The Blackest Crow, and The Mysterious Redbirds. Tina worked tirelessly until she got us on a national record label with Gary Reed at Copper Creek Records for our 3rd release, The Mysterious Redbirds.
Yeah, well, when I first met James, he had a business partner and life partner by the name of Tina Aridis, and together they worked together very well. Where James might have been a little on the reserved side, Tina was very outgoing, and they had a very dynamic relationship that worked well, that served the two of them very well. I first heard James's music about 20 years ago when he first approached me about doing a recording project with him. He had recorded a CD with a group that he called the Mysterious Redbirds, which was a trio comprised of himself on guitar and vocals, a banjo player by the name of Tom Paley, who used to be with the New Lost City Ramblers group years ago, and a fiddle player by the name of Bill Christopherson. And the 3 of them recorded it was a very nice collection of basically old-time songs, and James was shopping for a label for that project, and that was my first acquaintance with James and his music.
Tom Paley started playing banjo when he was about 14 or 15 years old. He was born in New York City, raised here. He'd listened to Uncle Dave Macon on the radio. Later he played with Woody Guthrie, who also lived in the city. A lot of people don't realize that old-time bluegrass and old-time country the recording started right here in New York City. About 1922, Eck Robertson came up here, and Jimmy Rogers and the Carter family, they all recorded in New York City. It's a long history of old-time bluegrass and country music right here.
Encouraged by his success with Tom Paley and his record deal with Copper Creek Records, James began seeking out collaborations with other artists in the area.
During that time, I had the pleasure of recording and performing with well-known artists like John Harold, Kenny Kosek, and Danny Kalb. Those 3 albums with Tom Paley, Bill Christopherson, and myself, and guest performers, helped solidify my place in the Brooklyn bluegrass scene and formed relationships that I still have today. In fact, Kenny was featured on my most recent album, Rhyme and Season.
I just love what he chooses to write about. He has some that are set in a honky-tonk and about the interaction of the people there, about falling in love or falling out of love, and it's always got the detail. When James writes and the songs he picks, you hear the actual conversation going on, so I know. They don't have to say I love you or I don't love you. I know what's going on just because of, what's in the lyrics. So that's what's so cool. And the last James Reams product I had some great banjo playing on it, kind of a post-Don Reno style that I thought maybe was getting forgotten, but it's really cool and really fresh. So, all I could say about it to James Reams is don't never quit.
The cold black water roared down from the hills, made Buffalo Creek a dark river that kills. No act of God, no ordinary flood. The water that did this was the devil's own mud.
So when did you put together the band we know as the Barnstormers?
I think around 1993. I knew I needed to take the next step and form my own band if my career as a musician was to go anywhere.
Hi, my name is Bill Knowlton, and I have a radio show in Syracuse, Utica, and Watertown, New York. It's called the Bluegrass Ramble, and it's on every Sunday night from 9 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. I think think I heard James at least 20 years ago, and it was probably because he sent me one of his CDs to use on the Bluegrass Ramble, and I was very impressed with it. I wrote the liner notes for Barnstorming, and it was easy to do because there were a lot of James Reams material that I could use, and of course, from then on, he made a whole bunch of other albums, and they were equally as good.
Wasn't Barnstorming the first album that included original songs from you and Tina?
Well, if you don't count a little mouth harp piece I did for Kentucky Songbird. Barnstormin' is the first album to include any songs written by me. There are 7 original songs on that album, and I collaborated with Tina on 4 of them. In fact, one of those songs has become the band's signature song, Kentucky River.
Kentucky River keeps on flowing, pours from the mountains into my heart. Though I've left my home far behind me, the river and I never can part. I was born in East Kentucky, a river runs through my hometown. Its waters wash clean the souls of sinners, its grassy banks are holy ground. Kentucky River keeps on flowing, pours from the mountains into my heart. Though I've left my home far behind me, the river and I never can part. As a child, I took my daydreams to those clear waters and that green shore, and I dreamt I was leaving my lonesome valley. Now I dream of going home once more. Kentucky River keeps on flowing, pours from the mountains into my heart. Though I've left my home far behind me, the river and I never can part. The river and I never can part.
I wrote several more songs together before she became too ill to do anything. But the first song that we collaborated on didn't actually appear on an album until 4 years later. We didn't know it then, but the song proved to be strangely prophetic. It's called Eye of the Storm and speaks of hard times, misery, and loss. And we included on the album Troubled Times.
Summer, at the last light of day, as the withering heat was waning and the sky was turning gray. Though I saw the dark clouds forming, I hoped to wait it out, but a hard rain was a-falling and the wind drowned out my shouts.
James shared about his songwriting collaboration with Tina in a 2001 interview with Paul Birkin, host of Poughkeepsie Live.
Welcome back to Poughkeepsie Live. This is the interview segment. Tonight's special guest is James Reams.
Thanks, Paul. We really appreciate being here tonight. Thanks.
Now, some of the songs are your songs, and some of the songs are old standards.
That's right. We like to take them and do different arrangements with the old songs. And then I do write a number of songs now, and a lot of them appear on the Barnstorming album, and I have a wonderful collaborator that I write with, Tina Reams, and I tell you, she's the most wonderful, beautiful woman in the world, and I'm the luckiest man.
Terrific.
To be able to have a songwriting collaborator like Tina to be able to collaborate with. I love her very, very much. We've been really lucky to have this wonderful musical collaboration.
After recording Barnstorming, James struggled to recover from the neck surgery that left his vocal cords paralyzed for over 6 months. During his lengthy recovery, James and Tina hatched an idea for a documentary film about the first-generation bluegrass greats.
You mentioned the song Weary Prodigal Son from Mabel and Sarah Carter helped you through a vocal cord paralysis. You're a pretty active guy. What did you do during that downtime?
It was frustrating, and I was having a hard time keeping my head above the waters of depression. I spent a lot of time on the internet researching songs and the history of bluegrass and so on. And I remember reading about yet another death of one of the bluegrass legends that had been instrumental in setting me on my own musical journey, and thinking what a shame it would be if their stories were lost to future generations. Tina recognized a lifeline when she saw it and encouraged me to interview some of the remaining pioneers of bluegrass. And we put together a little documentary film that would preserve their tales of the early days and share their insights with generations to come. With a whole lot of footage to go through and edit, but by then my voice was back and I'd been cleared to sing again. So the film got put on a back burner where it stayed until I needed another lifeline after Tina's death.
It was towards the end of 2001 when James teamed up with another great banjo player, Walter Hensley, quite by accident.
I understand that you and Walter Hensley met in one of those kind of right time at the right place stories.
You're sure right about that. Walter and I met in the early 1990s at a bluegrass festival out in Groveton, New Hampshire. The festival was being held at a local speedway track, and at night they would stop the music so the cars could race. Well, I walked into Vernon McIntyre's tour bus looking for somebody to pick because we had two band members that had gone, left on a ride, and their car broke down. So I knocked on the door, and I walked in, and there was Walter just sitting there on the bus with Vernon, smoking a cigarette and looking, all the world like a Civil War general. We got to talking, and I asked him why he hadn't recorded in a number of years, and he said, "No one's willing to work as hard as I want them to." I told him that I'd have as many rehearsals as he felt necessary to get the project done the way he wanted it to be done. And that's how our self-titled Barons of Bluegrass album got made.
The resulting album garnered an IBMA nomination for Recorded Event of the Year and an Emerging Artist nomination for James.
Over the years, I've received, as we tend to do in radio, I've received a lot of product from James Reams and his band, and he's had a bunch of different bands, at least as I recall. I've received albums that were just James Reams albums, James Reams and the Barnstormers, which I think is probably his biggest body of work, but also James Reams and Walter Hensley and the Barons of Bluegrass. And I remember when those albums came out, I always loved Walter Hensley's banjo playing. I'd known him from other bands that he had played with over the years, and so we played that stuff on my show. It sounded great.
And it really bears mentioning that James did a great favor to the whole field by promoting and working with the great Walter Hensley on banjo. He was one of my favorite all-time banjo players, and it made me really happy to see James forming an alliance with him and helping him be heard one more time in his later years. Just a great banjo player.
The first album with Walter Hensley resulted in a couple of IBMA nominations for you, didn't it?
Yeah, it seemed like everything happened at once. Copper Creek Records released our first album in 2002. That album came out just after I went into the hospital for a second round of neck surgery. I remember being home recuperating when I received the news that our album had been nominated for the International Bluegrass Music Association's Recorded Event of the Year, and I had been nominated for Emerging Artists. If I hadn't just had surgery, I probably would have been swinging from the rafters with excitement. Walter was much more down to earth in his response. When I called him I told him that we were against the Chieftains and the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. He replied, "Might as well forget that one."
The album also earned an IBMA nomination for the liner notes written by Tina Aridas. Bluegrass Unlimited reviewer Richard D. Smith called her liner notes well written and historically valuable. This proved to be true when her liner notes were referenced in the 2011 biography about Mike Seeger, Music from the True Vine, by Bill C. Malone, as well as Tim Newby's book, Bluegrass in Baltimore, which was released in 2015. James put his recuperation time to good use by including 4 more original songs on his next 2 albums that were released in 2005.
Wild Card created a lot of interest among DJs and promoters. Everyone wanted us to perform, and Walter just wasn't sure he could do it anymore. Thankfully, he did come to a few shows with us, and it was just magical watching him work the crowd into a frenzy with his amazing skill. Even artists like Del McCurry and Robbie McCurry would be standing just off stage with their mouths hanging wide open after one of Walter's mind-blowing banjo breaks.
Wasn't your Troubled Times project that doubled this set?
Well, you see, Tina and I have been bitten by the film bug when we did interviews for Making History with the Pioneers of Bluegrass. We thought it'd be fun to put together a documentary about the band. You know, one of those behind-the-scenes kind of films. I'm so glad we did it too, because it preserved a very precious time in my life.
Well, James Reams is a stylist within the framework of the genre of bluegrass music. And he keeps old-time hillbilly alive as well. Honky-tonk music, truck driving songs. I mean, out of the blue, he's, writing songs about the coal mines, and not just one, but several songs covering that. I mean, those songs would have been right at home on a Merle Travis album of coal mining songs.
Troubled Times includes one of my favorite original pieces, Hills in My County. I wrote that song with Tina after a trip through the Appalachian Mountains and seeing the incredible damage that the coal mining practice of mountaintop removal, where they blow off the top of mountains, was doing to our nation's landscape. And I was especially happy to give permission for it to be used in the soundtrack for the 2007 documentary Mountaintop Removal, to help raise awareness about the destructiveness of this mining practice.
If God did not put coal in these mountains, if He had blessed them with nothing to mine, the hilltop would offer their green domes to heaven.
Some folks may think that musicians shouldn't use their music to promote a personal agenda, but that's where the passion comes from. It comes from that gnawing concern, that overwhelming desire to do something.
By now, James had developed quite a following in bluegrass circles, and things were really picking up when his whole world suddenly keeled over.
Your album, One Foot in the Honky Tonk, wasn't released until 6 years after Wild Card and Troubled Times. That was a pretty rough time for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. We had started working on the next project in 2007 when Tina began to have what we thought were just stomach problems. Like so many folks, we were devastated by the news that Tina had cancer. And from that point on, everything went on hold as I devoted every spare minute to helping Tina cope with recovering from the radical surgery and then the painful radiation procedures. And in 2009, we were coming up on the year anniversary and hoping to hear the doctor pronounce her cancer-free. Instead, we learned that the cancer had metastasized and had come back with a vengeance. The doctor gave her just 18 months to live.
Once again, James and Tina turned to bluegrass music to help take their minds off the death sentence that Tina was living with on a daily basis.
Tina wanted to work on the Honky Tonk album and try to get it finished in the time that she had left. She was even able to come to the studio for a couple of recording sessions. One of the songs we wrote together, Snake Eyes, is included on the album. But it's the one I wrote that really captured how I was feeling. It's called River Rising and talks about the floodwaters that came up and washed away a family's dreams. That's how I felt, like all our dreams were being washed away.
If the levee breaks, take our dreams away.
Tina died just a few weeks before the album was finished. In her eulogy, Gabrielle Gray, executive director of the International Bluegrass Music Museum, noted that one of Tina's amazing talents was her ability to reach people from different parts of the world, connecting them through music and her written words. After her passing, James has devoted himself to connecting people with the bluegrass music they both loved.
West for the air key. This big city life is killing me.
After Tina's death, James decided to move out west to be closer to his ailing mother. He needed a new adventure to help him heal from losing Tina. Though he maintained ties with his bandmates back east, he set about doing what he does so well, building a new band in the Southwest.
I put together my own bands because I like hardcore bluegrass that features innovation. This isn't museum music. It's living, breathing creation. And I wanted to sing and play with other musicians that felt as I did, that were dedicated and committed to making music that moved people.
James likes to be in the moment when he sings. He infuses emotion and passion in every song, never holding back. James provides bluegrass on a primitive, almost primal level, incorporating that early rustic quality that was such an important part of vocalists like Red Allen, Carter Stanley, and Lester Flatt.
I'm John Lawless with Bluegrass Today, and I've been hearing James's music for most of his 25 years. I think he was based on the East Coast when I first heard him. Somebody who was doing something that was truly different, writing his own music. I think really that the songwriting hasn't changed a whole lot. So even though he's a desert musician now, he's still got that same kind of granular, gritty, true life stories that he's always done in bluegrass.
But I've been appreciating and knowing James's work, his desire, his heart for the music that he plays, the kind of music that he plays. You can certainly feel it, I can understand it, and that's what always drew me to him. And he's just a great guy. So, James, congratulations.
Putting together a new band is a challenge under the best of circumstances. But through the shifting of possible bandmates, James always managed to stay true to his sound, no matter where he was performing.
The bluegrass music scene in Arizona was just different and new to me, and difficult at first for me. At first I relied on the internet to find out where the local jams were being held, and just started showing up. I met some really great people and talented performers at these informal gatherings and began the hardest process a band leader has to do: put together a new band.
James teamed up with legendary fiddler Blaine Sprouse for a little over a year while he built his new band out west. But he didn't cut ties with the Barnstormers back east and continued to travel with them. The West Coast band took shape and started forming a cohesive unit. Once that initial search process was over, James had time to focus on another passion: completing the movie about pioneers of bluegrass that he and Tina had started before she became ill.
There's never been a time I haven't felt driven to play and sing music. As I approached my 20th anniversary as a bandleader, I wanted to do something special to celebrate. We booked a coast-to-coast celebration, including bluegrass festivals from California to New York and many points in between. But I wasn't really ready to work on a new album yet. I was struggling to figure out what else I could do to commemorate this event, and then remembered the documentary that Tina and I had been so passionate about. I decided that I would finish that film in honor of my 20th anniversary and in memory of Tina.
The feature-length documentary, Making History with the Pioneers of Bluegrass, tells of the early days in their own words, was completed and released in 2013, just in time to recognize James's 20 years as a band leader.
Hi, this is John Lawless with Bluegrass Today. We're at the Pickin' in the Panhandle Festival. It's Sunday afternoon, a beautiful day, and we're delighted to have James Reams with us today.
Thanks, John. Real excited, and what a great festival. Just been amazing.
Well, what I really want to talk to you about is this film project you're working on, which is a fascinating concept, making history with the pioneers of bluegrass. Where did this come from?
Well, in 2002, they were opening up the Bluegrass Museum in Owensboro, Kentucky, and there were so many people that passed away that year, of the pioneers of the early first generation, that I just felt that it was important for us to get their stories, because one thing I know that you probably enjoy and that I enjoy is whenever you're backstage or you're in the bus and everything and you hear these stories and you think, well, what's going to happen if all of them disappear?
Viewers get to hear stories of sacrifice, dedication, innovation, and downright risk to life and limb, straight from the mouths of those involved. The film focused on the individuals that helped to create the bluegrass music genre, like Jimmy Martin, Mac Wiseman, Bobby Osborne, and the Stonemans. Sadly, many of those interviewed passed away before the movie was released.
And to me, one of the most touching things was when the first preview came out, in 2002, we had a little preview, 20-minute preview. Art Stamper's widow contacted me, sent me a prayer card, and said this is such a great thing to be able to remember art, and particularly the way that he'd like to be remembered, as a fiddler that taught other people and loved their music.
We particularly appreciate what he's done to preserve the history of the founding of bluegrass and the musicians that made it such a great field of art. Thank you, James.
James's mother also passed away a few months before the film was released, and James now found himself more alone than ever before.
As time draws near, my dearest dear, but you and I must part. I feel the grief and woe in my poor aching heart.
James now had time to devote to the Park Slope Bluegrass and Old Time Music Jamboree once again. The Jamboree had been in hiatus for a couple years while Tina was ill and just after her death. James started it back up again in 2012, but his heart was still drowning in grief. Even though he honored Tina's devotion to bluegrass at the event, he struggled with the fact that she was no longer by his side.
Howdy, everybody. My name is William Geringer, and I am a DJ host of Tobacco Road Bluegrass that airs every Sunday nights from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. on the BluegrassJamboree.com. And what I'd like to do here is just take a couple minutes and share with you a special relationship that I have with James Reams and his band, James Reams and the Barnstormers. He has done so much to help promote bluegrass music and get it out there and reach out, and he's just been an ambassador, as far as I'm concerned, for bluegrass music. Great guy to work with.
Hi, this is Jim Goodday from the Railroad Boys, and I'm here to say a little bit about James Reams. He's a friend of mine. When I first met him, I believe it was in Rochester, New York at the Brantling Bluegrass Festival, and we've been friends ever since because I so respect his band and the music that he creates. I think he's a great band leader. And
by 2014, James was back in the swing of it again, and it showed. That year, the Jamboree was nominated by the International Bluegrass Music Association for Best Event of the Year, and James got to honor a longtime hero, Bill Keith, with the Brown Jug Award.
Well, James Reams, as band leader of the Barnstormers, does a tremendous job as a musician and as a vocalist. And he's also done a lot for bluegrass music in the New York area with the annual Park Slope bluegrass event that he has. And he gives away an award every year to a person that he feels and his committee feels has done a lot for the people of New York City. Calls it the Brown Jug Award, and I was the proud recipient of it several years ago.
The Jamboree is such an infectious, happy event. It provides those attending with opportunities to learn, to meet other music lovers and performers, and it's an incubator for bluegrass in Brooklyn. Music can be transformational, and our little festival in Park Slope has certainly transformed my life.
The Jamboree grows each year as James continues to encourage the younger generation to embrace bluegrass music in all its diversity. One of the performers in 2017, Tin Bone, featured 12-year-old banjo champion Little Nora Brown. A couple years after moving to Arizona, James had accepted the nomination of chairman for the Arizona Bluegrass Association, and he began working closely with a bluegrass dynamo named Annie Beach, who was recently nominated for Mentor of the Year by the International Bluegrass Music Association. James caught up with her at the event.
She's up for an award for Mentor.
Jam Pack has shows in the yard about 5 times a year or so called Beach House Review, because my last name is Beach. And James came and played, and from then on we just struck up a friendship, and I tried to support whatever he was doing, and he the same for Jam Pack. And Arizona is a very hard place to, as you can imagine, break into. And he's made his way and has made friends, and he holds a yearly film festival. And, you know, he's just a great person and always upbeat, you know, with us.
James's love for teaching and instilling a passion for bluegrass music in young folks was matched by Annie Beach, the founder of the Jam Pack Neighborhood Band. That alliance is still going strong today. In an effort to help promote bluegrass music in the Phoenix area, James teamed up with Ned Robbins to launch R&R Productions, with the purpose of creating an oasis for bluegrass in the desert. Performers such as Audie Blaylock and Redline, New Blue, the Spinney Brothers, Sideline, Edgar Loudermilk, and the Larry Stevenson Band made Phoenix a stop along their way and received a warm welcome from the bluegrass lovers gathered to hear them perform.
James Reams, what can we say about him? I knew James's music a long time before I ever knew him personally. Our band Sideline, he's had us out, helped us promote a few shows out in Arizona, but love his music, love his singing, just true blue, and what you see is what you get with him, and that's rare these days.
There have been so many highlights in my career the past few years. I've been truly blessed. It had been a dream of mine to perform live at WAMU's Bluegrass Country, and that dream came true in July of 2015. We brought our friend, the award-winning fiddler Patrick McAvenue, with us and just tore the place up.
And James just kept on reaching goal after goal. Over the next couple of years, he was invited to perform at the Musical Instrument Museum, ranked in the top 20 museums in the U.S., and the #1 attraction in Phoenix. He also participated in the International Bluegrass Music Association's Leadership Bluegrass program. And he performed live on the AZTV program, Wake Up Arizona, hosted by Sandy Moss.
Hey, we are back with the coolest bluegrass band. We have James Reams and the Barnstormers. I'm loving that title. On with us. That was a beautiful song. Can I say you guys rock? Is that like bad to
That's
say about
great. Thank you very much. I think we do.
Oh, you do? I mean, you guys just really, I mean, you just want to be like dancing. Okay, hey, we need another song by James Reams and the Barnstormers.
Well, I'd love to. This is a song that I wrote. Actually, I was raised in coal country in eastern Kentucky. This is a song about the coal plateau. It's the story of the coal miner and how they live such a desperate life going down into the mine every day. When the time came, I knew I was finally ready to release another album. this time featuring band members from both coasts and longtime friend Kenny Kosak.
Hello, music lovers. You know, I've been playing with James Reams and the Barnstormers for nigh on, 20 years, I guess. So we've had great fun in the studio working on these songs. They're challenging, they're fresh, and at the same time, deeply evocative of a mountain tradition.
Rhyme and Season charted on the Roots Music Report for 7 months after it was released and received high accolades from DJs, music critics, fellow musicians, and bluegrass lovers. This concept album focused on the journey that all of us are on. Some paths are by choice, others are forced to go a certain route. James admitted that the album featured references to his own journey of healing after Tina's death, but he also wished to raise awareness about the different faces of homelessness. Now James is looking at what lies around the next bend for him as he celebrates his 25th anniversary as a band leader.
My family has gathered their high shoulder grief. The smiles on their faces deny what's beneath. Their sorrows, their burden, my troubles done. Their struggle continues, my battle is won.
What the film is about holding on to your dreams. And we want it to be inspirational. We want it to be inspirational for young people to realize that, you don't have to be the biggest name in anything. You just have to grind.
Instead of slipping quietly into obscurity after Tina's death, James made a few dramatic changes in his life and ended up with some of the most productive years in his long career. And James has no intention of hitting for shore now.
Listen to James' music, I hear it on the radio, and I'm really impressed by James's traditional feel. I really like people that play traditional bluegrass music to give people a chance to hear what it sounds like, what it sounds like, what it used to sound like, and I know that people that actually play traditional bluegrass music also bring their own thing to it, so hopefully someone else will pick it up and it'll just get carried on into the tradition.
The opportunity to make this documentary about some of his struggles and ultimate triumphs was daunting at first. But as he worked with the filmmaker and with friends to put this film together, he began to see what they had seen all along, that his story is one of hope.
So thanks to James for all you've done for the music, and long may you wave and carry the bluegrass flag.
Yeah, I've known James for probably, 25 years, and met him back when I was working with James King. We always seem to be in the same spot at the same time, so I guess we were all underdogs at that point. But anyhow, it's good to see him still kicking and hitting it hard, so congratulations on 25 years.
The way I hear it, it's the 25th anniversary, which I find hard to believe, but time does pass quickly. But all the best to you, James, and keep up the great work, and I hope that we cross paths again soon.
I've admired you so much on the road. It's really, I think when I was first starting, which you had 5 years under your belt.
I did have 5 years.
And I just remember not knowing anything, and you were so nice to me. You would talk to me and tell me, some ideas and things that would be good for me. Well, thank you so much for letting me be part of your journey.
My name is Daniel Boner, and I'm the director of East Tennessee State University's Bluegrass, Old Time, and Country Music program, and also part of the Becky Buller Band. Well, I haven't known James that long. He and I were both in the 2016 IBMA Leadership Bluegrass class, and that was the first time I ever really got to know him. I mean, I'd heard about James a lot and knew about his music. And of course, celebrating 25 years, that's quite an accomplishment. Let's see, 25 years ago, I was like 10 years old. And at that point, I was probably learning still. So I want to congratulate James on 25 successful years and many more years to come.
Hi, folks. My name is Harry Grant, and for 36 years, I've been running the Wind Gap Bluegrass Festival in Wind Gap, Pennsylvania. Now it's on Memorial Day weekend. And one of the bands that I've had there for almost ever is James Reams and the Barnstormers. James has a lot of fans there that come up and let me know that they like his band.
He is just quite a guy, and again, James, I just want to give you congratulations on 25 fantastic years. The project that this guy does, the talent he has and the work that he does, he makes me proud to be in bluegrass.
I'm Fred Bartenstein, a board member of the Foundation for Bluegrass Music, and we'd like to congratulate James Reams on 25 years in bluegrass.
Congratulations on 25 years. This is Barb Heller from North Country Public Radio.
Hey folks, this is David Davis with the Warrior River Boys from down in Alabama. I'm glad to have the opportunity to speak for, or just say congratulations to my buddy James Reams. We've known each other for a long, long time, and so James, congratulations on 25 wonderful years of playing the right kind of music, the kind that we can feel and we can understand, and if it's the good Lord's will, I hope He gives you 25 more. You take care. Congratulations.
I've always been in an inquiry of life, and just like change is inevitable, surrender is also part of the inevitable. I think surrendering to what calls you and reinventing yourself are probably some of the most exciting revelations you can have in your life. I know there are lots of folks out there who have experienced even more difficult situations than I have. Like me, they could have easily given up at any point along the journey, just sunk to the bottom and stayed there. Kentucky River keeps on flowing, flows from the mountains into my heart. Though I left my home far behind me, the river and I never can part. I thought my life was over when I lost Tina, but these past years have shown me that I have a lot to live for and a lot left to give.
James has proven that no one is merely a drop in the bucket. We're all part of the flowing river.
Kentucky River keeps on flowing, pours from the mountains into my heart.